Dharma discussion, and it's very helpful to hear questions about your practice or anything you've heard or read and feel confused about. Not that we'll be able to clear that up, but because we're like you. And we will be passing around a microphone, and that is for the people who are listening on streaming, because they can't hear the questions otherwise. Okay. Yes.
Zopa, did I hear you say that patience is love?
Is love?
Is love or is kindness?
No, but that's a great idea.
I guess what I would love is to hear you talk a bit more about patience and how it unfolds in your practice.
How does patience unfold in my practice? And you mean on and off cushion, or?
Yes.
Oh, well, slowly. Really slowly. What I observe is that, and I've been, I used to say I've been practicing 23 years, but that's not true. I would say the first 5 years I didn't even really know what practice was, but I hung around my teacher and my Sangha. So it feels like I started practicing at about year 5 of being with that group, which was a group of people from Seattle and Portland who were following Venerable Thubten Chödrön, who's now the abbess of Sravasti Abbey. I also had met Lama Michaels too, so I was dipping in and out of KCC. What are you? It feels too big of a question. What in particular are you struggling with, or what leads you to ask that, Rosemary?
Well, it's funny because I did think you said patience was love, and it felt like as you were talking about it that I could see a way into being more patient with myself and my practice, and that could also transfer to others, I would assume, being more patient with others. And for some reason I hadn't thought that before.
Yeah.
So I guess I'd just like to explore.
Yeah, so when you had that sense, you saw a way in.
Yeah.
What was that?
Let me think for a minute. I think it was a way to lay down my judgments about myself and my practice, and just kind of give myself a break and give myself time to progress as I can progress, in my own way, essentially.
Yeah.
And not somebody else's way, my way.
And that's very loving. It's very kind. It has a lot to do with kindness, So in my practice, I can say two things I see. One is I feel more patient when I open to what's called the Buddhist worldview, and that is time beginningless and endless. Just feel that. Not confined by this life, this session, this goal, beginningless and endless time. That's the Buddhist worldview. We've taken many forms, we'll take many more forms. It's not a belief thing, but it's certainly, like some other teachings in Buddhism, which may be difficult for Westerners, it certainly opens up and relaxes us, so we can adopt it. We can just say, I'm just adopting this. I don't know if it's true or not. Like the thought, everyone's been my dear mother in the past. Really? Like Mary referred to when she looks at the children, they were my mother. Well, you don't have to believe it. You don't have to foist it on anyone, but it's quite helpful to try it on and go around the world thinking that. If they weren't your dear mother, they were your little brother. They were your daughter. They were a friend. And then a warm-heartedness just naturally rises instead of these people are all strangers and I'm scared. I don't like any of them. And so it just, that time thing helps with patience. Now, then, what I seem to see in my own practice is, what I do see is, as soon as I get a thought like that, then I can see an opening to where it might be, I might use it in a detrimental way. For example, beginningless, endless time. Don't need to do anything right now. You know? And so it's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, where does that go? Into laziness. What they call laziness, it's not like sloth necessarily, although that can be one, you know, watching the internet and eating bonbons all day. But the laziness of busyness the teachings talk about, I think that's the one we're more susceptible to. Why they call it laziness, it means laziness toward the Dharma. But we're very busy toward worldly things. I got to run here, I got to run there, I got to buy that, I got to get this done. My list is 12 items today, and I get to the end, and I only did 10, so I whip myself, you know, or I stay up late to get them done. Then I can't practice, you know. That's called the laziness of busyness. It's a funny term for it, but it means lazy towards the Dharma, very busy towards worldly goals. Which are the comfort of this life, or having, gaining wealth, or gaining good reputation or praise, you know, all those things. So those are some of the kinds of laziness that can come up, but it's very helpful to open up to this beginningless, endless time. Making progress in this life as well as we can, then knowing that will help in future lives, and we keep making progress, and eventually we can have this full awakening, which is only recognizing what's already there. No magic to it. That good enough? Okay. Yeah, back here. Crawford.
I really liked what you had to say about patience, and I've been trying to work with that as to counteract anger.
Yeah.
And that's something I've really been putting all my attention on. And recently, as I've been sort of studying this, I've discovered something called inappropriate attention.
Yeah.
And I was really pleased to learn that this actually had a name, because this is something that I struggle with a great deal. And basically, I just tell myself stories that may or may not have any basis in fact, and it gets me really worked up. It's like there's 1,000 monkeys in my skull with typewriters, and they are not writing the complete works of Shakespeare. and they're writing like horror movies, and they get me really upset. And the really pernicious part is that sometimes the monkeys get it right, and I grasp onto that and say, okay, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Look, and
yeah.
Good job, monkeys, and keep it up. And that just provides a lot of unhealthy momentum to, basically pay more attention to the monkeys, and they're busy little guys. And I was wondering if there's anything related to the patience or compassion, or anything specific I could do to focus on that inappropriate attention and get the monkeys to chill out a little bit.
Well, you're doing it. I mean, everything you just described, you're doing it. The inappropriate attention is kind of a very specific thing, and it's it's related to both attachment and aversion. aversion, all the anger and frustration under that, attachment, all the desire and I want. But when we inappropriately exaggerate the positive of something, we are not seeing it clearly. So you can probably all remember this from a romantic relationship. That's where it really shows up. Oh my God, that person is perfect, and I must be with him or her. Something like that. Maybe when we're in our teens and 20s more. But at any rate, it can even be about a cake. Too. Like, this dessert will be the most fabulous, and I will build my party around it, and everyone will love it. And then when everyone doesn't, we're exceedingly disappointed when the relationship can't be the perfect thing because by its nature, it's not, then we run into frustration and anger. So it can work on both ends. We exaggerate the positive and we run after it. We exaggerate the negative. I don't like that person. They are like this. The monkeys are typing. And they are really inherently like that. They'll never change. No one loves them. They're inherently unlovable. And now the monkeys are making a novel. But we are exaggerating the negative. Neither of those sees what's really there, even conventionally, even on a relative level, much less sees it on the ultimate level of the deep interdependence, just like me, even beyond the me and the you. I'll just touch on that because it's big, but the ultimate is no difference. No difference. I mean, that's teeny part of it. It's empty of all the stories we're making up. So just seeing it, you're seeing it. There's no other tricks. You just keep seeing it. The other thing you can do is keep noticing the results of the anger and noticing the results of the patience. Really notice in great detail. Write that story out. Have the monkeys write the whole story out. When I was patient, this happened. And yeah, we can get caught on the one time our anger seemed to work, But if you really follow the whole story out, it didn't. It got you some kind of short-term something, but usually what gets sacrificed is the relationship. Yeah, you get the short-term compliance or something, but the relationship is now undermined. Next time we go to that person, there's that tension there. So, yeah, just write the whole story out and see the interdependence of how these function, anger and patience. You're doing it. Yeah, thank you. Do you have anything to add? Not required, but you could.
There's something in watching, so taking a kind of a critical look, just how the monkeys really are performing. and you, as you note, sometimes the monkeys do predict something. But if we look, so kind of what purpose are they fulfilling for us?
Oh, yeah.
What purpose are they actually fulfilling for us? And it's good because sometimes we do actually have to try to think about the outcome of events that we don't really know about, and think about how things are going to turn out, think about the consequences of things in order to engage in the world. But even with that, as I think about it, I'm thinking all our monkeys will have different styles. And we can be, just like we're fans of a certain kind of music, we become fans of the monkeys when they write in a certain style. So this, our monkeys might generally be kind of entertaining us with kind of heavy metal or light pop or blues or whatever it is. Only classical. But we'll be very entranced because they're entertaining us according to the style we've become accustomed to, and just being entertained, kind of filling our heads with something, it doesn't really serve either our purpose long run or anyone else's. So actually thinking, what is this doing for me? And since we will rely on our monkeys to do a certain amount of work, we have to make sure that they're doing the work that we really want them to.
Yeah. Thank you. Over here, who's got the microphone? Right over here, Carolyn. Yeah. There you go.
Thank you. Does that mean that it's appropriate or okay to accept the monkeys and what they're up to because they're ultimately there, as I think I heard you say, Bill, because they're there for a purpose, and they will reveal what that purpose is in letting them and kind of accepting them and what they're doing, and then because I've heard something that it hasn't made sense to me yet. Crawford. In Crawford's question, it felt like acceptance. I didn't hear the word acceptance, but it felt like acceptance would be connected to patience. And I don't know about that either. And so I'm asking a couple of different questions at once, perhaps. But the monkeys are talking.
They always are.
Let's see. Now I'm feeling like I'm a good example. If you ask a man 2 questions, he'll only answer 1.
That's okay.
That's okay. In terms of the sort of looking to see if there's some kind of purpose, I wasn't sort of suggesting to just sit back. I was suggesting to think more clearly about what intentions or purposes we might find actually in accord with our deeper aspirations, our deeper wishes, and then to look and see both looking at the content and the style of it to see whether this is actually, are we actually applauding the monkeys just for entertaining us in the way that we've become accustomed, that you're mentioning working with anger. So we might applaud the monkeys when they get us really worked up. So well done, you nailed that situation. You have articulated exactly why that person is an idiot. But beyond that, we may actually see the shortcomings in somebody's approach to something, but what are we actually going to do with that? If we're just going to sit around and feel self-satisfied about it and feel alienated from them and superior, puff ourselves up with pride, which might actually dissipate if we actually showed the manuscript that the monkeys wrote to somebody else and said, this is a really good one here. And they say, but you overlooked this and this and this. And you go, oh, well. So really, really thinking about it in relationship to our aspirations, in relationship to the impacts. So that's kind of connected to the first one. And understanding and deepening our aspirations is an ongoing thing. It requires continual refinement, and some of it is actually looking to see what the monkeys do and seeing what happens, as you were saying. What's the outcome? What is the outcome? What's the outcome? You speak sometimes about road rage as a kind of, how's this working for me? How's this working for anybody else?
Yeah.
And that in itself, if we treat this as something that we're actually actively doing as opposed to just a natural, a phenomenon of nature that just arises quite naturally, we can say, oh, well, they're this kind of thing. I see I'm going back into this pattern. All right, well, I can do something else. Mm-hmm. And in that, there's kind of a gentleness in that. And that's an important piece of that. And to the extent that we talk about acceptance or kind of this nice, this wonderful mishearing of love and patience, there is a kind of what we would associate with kind of a loving outlook in that gentleness of really seeing what's going on, and then saying, oh no, but we can do something else. So we don't need to add aggression to the mix at that point. And when we do, we generally obscure a refined view. And I think you mentioned taking a really careful look. Mm-hmm. To be able to really look carefully, we need the kind of calmness, clarity, and a gentleness.
Yeah, and so the so-called antidotes to anger, one of them in the Kagyu lineage, this lineage emphasizes it, just see it rise. So in that sense, it does teach us something. That's kind of a bit of what I think you're touching on. Does anger kind of show us something? Yes, it's got huge energy. Often it's kind of heat or cold. So you want to kind of get to know it. It does show us what we don't want to do if you look at outcomes, And there's other kind, that's the kind of just see it, just be with it, Then there's also more conceptual active antidotes. Like one of them is sit and contemplate the disadvantages of anger. Just sit and not when you're angry, just a 3-minute meditation. When I'm angry, what happens? Well, it hurts your own body. Science will tell you that. Blood pressure goes up. It's, some people have heart attacks in the middle of a rage thing, So it hurts your own body. It creates a habit to do it again and again. It interrupts relationships. You always have to go back and apologize, or if you don't do that, pay the price. It engenders anger in others. I mean, you can just make your list. Once you do that, and that's very mental work, the next time it starts rising, those thoughts rise too. Oh, do I really want to go down this road? Do I want to pay all that price? Am I exaggerating the person's negativity? Someone loves them. Someone loves Donald Trump. Someone loves my worst enemy. So they see that being as lovable. There's no inherent unlovableness there. It's just a human suffering, causing suffering, suffering and causing suffering. So much like us. So those are helpful to think about ahead of time and then steer towards where we want to go.
Thank you.
Yeah. And what's your name?
Matt.
Matt. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Miriam Meyer. I have some question about what it really means to take refuge in the Buddha.
Can you say a little more, like what you're wondering? It's a good question. Yeah.
Well, I guess I wonder, like, related to, like, past, on the individual level, whether past religions or philosophies or spiritual thoughts I have, how that relates to taking refuge in the Buddha.
So, for example? I mean, it's good questions. I just
Well,
want to get at.
I know there's a ceremony where people take refuge in the Buddha,
Yes.
but I don't really understand what that means other than, is that just saying, well, I've read some books and I agree with the general philosophy, or is
Okay.
there more involved?
Okay. Good questions. I just want to, because if you just say refuge in the Buddha, it's 25 volumes. I don't know where to go in. So this is how I think about it. When you take refuge in the ceremony, a teacher is giving that ceremony. So you're enhancing a connection to that teacher, who has a connection to a teacher, to a teacher, to a teacher, to a teacher, back to the Buddha, 2,600 years ago, Shakyamuni. That's one way to think about it. You're also, you're acknowledging your own Buddhahood within your heart, your own inherent, indelible goodness, and saying, I'm going to work at discovering this and enhancing it and showing it and being that in the world and helping others to do that. And you're taking refuge in a community, because it's not like, therefore you have to come here. You're taking refuge in the community of Buddhism in the world. So that's a kind of nice thing, because as a Buddhist, or even one exploring, you can go to many different kinds of centers and be welcomed, whether you've had the ceremony or not, but it's deepening it. And I think it's taking refuge in your own practice. You're saying, I'm a Buddhist and I'm going to practice this. So in a way, you say, I'm going to practice this, it's priority for me. In other words, I'm not going to take refuge in Buddhism and then run off and study Sufism or something, all of which are good, or Christianity. You're saying, I'm choosing this path. And so I will work this path. And connected to a teacher and a Sangha, a group, I'll get support for that. So this is what I'm going to study, contemplate, and meditate. Is that kind of touch on it?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, great. Yeah, very good question. It does. I do want to touch on one other part that you said. It does. We can't help but bring our experiences from before to anything. So I was raised fundamental Catholic. I mean, really old-fashioned, pre-Vatican, nuns in black and the white thing. And I went to that school from first through 8th grade. So that affected me. One of the ways I saw it very concretely in Buddhism, for the first 5 years, I didn't take refuge. I loved Buddhism. I was going to retreats twice a year. I was totally drawn to my teacher. I was studying like crazy, but I was like, I'm not joining our religion. I am not joining our religion. And I had to watch for 5 years my dear Dharma friends take refuge one after another. I would sit in the back while they had the ceremony and think about it. And I watched the effect on them, and I saw, wow, they're like happier doing, they're in it. So finally, year number 5, that my teacher offered it, I went and put the white clothes on and took it. Now, here you don't even have to wear white clothes or anything. But it was like, that's what, I could see that effect. Like, I don't want to be engaged in something I'm not certain of. And that's okay. Take as much time as you want. For others, it's like, oh, I will try this refuge on as a seed because, like, for example, Kempo Lodro Donyo is coming, and he's going to give refuge on the final Tuesday, like the 18th or something. And, no, anyway, June, June 12th, he'll offer that refuge ceremony, and because he's deeply steeped in the lineage, that would be a cool thing, good, to take refuge from him, and for us who've had refuge to renew it with him. It makes a connection for endless time with that mind, not with the body of Kempo Lodrodonyo when he dies. That'll collapse like ours will. So it's not that. It's not the personality. It's making that connection to that mind stream which has studied, contemplated, meditated to a point of quite pure. And so that's a good thing to do. It's also good before taking refuge to read a little bit about it. There's some books in there, and Diane can point you. She's not just a bookstore person. She's becoming more like a librarian. I keep telling people, go see Diane and she'll find the exact book you need, which I think is true. Does that help? Yeah, so there's an opportunity. Yeah.
I think on our website there's a paper that Lama Michael wrote at some point, and if you search to the right place, you could find that. I just want to add one thing, which was, just remember from the earliest times, our Tibetan teachers always would make the point that we're never, in taking refuge in a Buddhist way, we're never doing it with therefore we're not, by doing that, we're not discounting or disparaging any other path. And so, that works in two ways. I mean, one is we're not saying that other people are on the wrong path, and we're on the right path. And it's also not denying then anything that we may still hold some sense of, respect or what we got out of, or what we, even at the same time, hold for another path. But it's more like we recognize that this path is valid, and like Zopa said, what we want to work on and where we're going now. But it's in no way disparaging other.
Yeah, and I found that working with Buddhism has actually led me to appreciate more what I got on my Catholic path. The ethics were intense, and the sense of community, and the sense that there is something bigger in life. And one of the sayings in the Bible was, love God with your whole heart and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, that's just a statement of total compassion. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. So something Jesus said, it's in almost all the Bibles. And so, I started appreciating, wow, I got a foothold there into spiritual life. And of course it came with some hard stuff like eternal hell and some misconceptions, but I got a foothold, and so I appreciate that. And it led me to be more appreciative of my beginning, so that inappropriate attention, where I was really angry at my religion, my first religion, that melted away, and I went, hey, these good things were there too. Yeah.
One other thing that Lama Michael often reminds us is that that refuge is an evolving thing over our life, or multiple lives. And just as it says in the refuge prayers, it's until full enlightenment I take refuge in the Buddha. So it's that deepens over time. So it's not necessary to have some sense that we have a complete and fixed notion of refuge. And then once we have that, and we have some certainty about that, some people will feel different degrees of certainty. But some people may just feel sort of a clear warmth of inspiration and wish to nurture that. So over time. And when it says until full enlightenment, I take refuge. Well, so then you discard refuge when, not exactly. You become a source of refuge. So that's the arc of practice, is from wherever it is that we begin with our seed of inspiration to the point where we've actually found liberation and can clearly elucidate that or articulate or assist others.
Thank you. Who's got the mic?
So when you described the process of taking refuge in the Buddha, and you described the teacher connected to the teacher connected to the teacher, is that what's meant by the lineage?
Yeah, the lineage is are the teachers.
Okay.
That you can trace from right here all the way through the pictures and on back. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a source of confidence. You know, when I sit, sometimes I simply, and many prayers start out like our Chenrezig practice on Wednesday. At the very beginning, we don't always do it because of time, but it has a long chant recitation to the lineage. Yeah. And then we can remember, even we don't do that long chant, remember we're here because of their efforts. Where would we get this in the US? I didn't hear the word Buddha until I was in college. Not that word. So someone has to be practicing, studying, writing way, way, way back. And it can give us a confidence and a kind of inspiration to do the work ourselves. My teacher, I love, she said this, when we were following her around up in Seattle, she'd say, you people, she'd get very fierce with us. Maybe because I had Catholic nuns, I liked that. She'd say, you people won't even drive across town 20 minutes to come and practice. Do you know that march across the Himalayas, like, was it 9 times or something?
A bunch.
To go on foot from Tibet to India, get the practices, bring them back, share them, go again through tigers and storms and robbers. And I mean, it wasn't like there was a police force in there. And it was kind of like, oh, I guess I can make that effort. I guess I can come more often. But it was an honoring of, my gosh, what they went through to get this and bring it to us. Yeah, and even our teachers, oh my gosh. I mean, you get close enough to watch a teacher and how they give their entire life to the Dharma. There's no other. Someone said to me about my teacher, Venerable Chidren, once, she has no other program for you except that you reach enlightenment. And I can see that. You know, she doesn't have any agenda. Zip. No personal agenda at all. With her students, the agenda is that you reach full awakening. And everything she says, everything she does, everything she refrains from doing is that. And this is true of our dear Lama Michael. He spends 24/7 basically. We hope he sleeps. We wonder sometimes. But that's what teachers do. So making that connection with the lineage, that feeds our practice that way in ways that are sometimes fully experiential. You can't even explain them. Like I'm explaining some things about my connection with my teacher, but those are just words. The connection is something experiential that is much more potent than that. So refuge can lead to that, but also take your time, do it when it makes sense to you. But also don't avoid it 5 years unless you need to. Linda, last comment. We need to wait for a... Yeah, maybe come up to the mic.
All right, this will be really quick. So the other day I was walking and I was thinking about the very first Tibetan Lama I met back in the 80s, who I was very distracted by following an American pseudo-guru. But this man and I would sit on a couch and he'd just pat my leg and we would chat. And he didn't speak a lot of English, and of course I didn't speak any Tibetan. But I came to know that he really was quite an incredible person. The reason he was in San Diego was that he was preparing for the 16th Karmapa to come and give the background teaching. And so through the years, he's become a very important person to me. And so the other day I was walking and I was thinking about him, and I thought, here was this jewel that, like in the story, I didn't recognize. And so I discarded it. And now I realize how precious it is. And it's really brought me so much closer to my practice right now, realizing that I don't want to discard this jewel again.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and by seeing what it really is, you've got it again. Yeah, thank you.
Never lost.
Never lost. Buddha nature never lost.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you so much, and it's cleaning day, so if at a minimum you can pick up your zabuton and your zafu and shake them out. If you can stay, there's a board in the back to pick a task, a sweeping or dusting, and that will help our center. Have a great week. Thank you.
And for anyone who's on the community list, if you look at the reading that Jeff and Sally offered for tomorrow, I think you'll find the one page very inspiring, and
Yes.
it might encourage you to hop on over and join in the discussion.